let's move to Bayern. We wanted to talk about Jamal Musiala and how amazing he has been, because I make the argument right now he's probably Germany's best player, maybe one of the best players in the world, period. But this is live as it happens. I got a push notification from Bayern Munich directly into my email folder, Presseerklärung. I love when these happen. Sometimes they are nothing. Sometimes they're actually really interesting. In this case, they're really interesting. Bayern Munich renews the contract with Vorstandsvorsitzende CEO Jan Christian Dresen until 2027. There was some reports that they might go separate ways, that they want a more footballing figure in that position. I think that is actually still the case. But, it seems like continuity is what they're craving. And I mean, why change now? It's going so very well for them. They're by far Germany's best club. I know the St Pauli game wasn't easy, but if you have Jamal Musiala, things can be made easy for you. I think it's a big sign that they're doing this now. They had a great weekend too, right? They hosted the NFL at the Allianz Arena. Fully packed house. That is a big revenue machine for the club, very important. And I think they did it in an environment that was where they as a club look good too. They go to St Pauli, they take all 3 points there. It just seems like Bayern Munich are in a really good place at the moment, Stefan.
Yeah. I mean, it's actually interesting. The Dresden and the Musiala thing are actually quite interesting, because I think to an extent, well, I'm trying to think of a word this, because I don't want to make it sound too pessimistic, as I always do, but I think you can praise Musiala and maybe ask question marks over this Bayern squad as it is at this moment in time. And by that, the point I'm making this, because I don't want to obviously make too big of a deal of it, because they obviously won. They did well against St Pauli, did well against Benfica, they'd done well against Union Berlin before that. Point of order is worth noting that I actually bet in that Union Berlin game on Musiala to score any time, and that's the only game in his last 5 appearances where he didn't score.
Oh,
and anyone who can remember that game, there was actually Harry Kane scored the goal where basically him and Musiala touched the ball at the same time, and it was awarded to Harry Kane, and I was obviously pulling my hair out over it. And it's typical that the one game he hasn't scored in the last 6 weeks or something is the one that I put money on. But yeah, his goal against St Pauli was incredible, and this is the kind of thing that he's incredible at. He's the one player in that team, I think, who can break down a tight defense more so than anyone else. Serge Gnabry is a very useful second striker who, can get on the end of a counter attack. Harry Kane is a very good penalty box striker who, when you give him service, scores goals. Kingsley Coman, equally another kind of very good counter-attacking player. Leroy Sané is a bit inconsistent. Obviously had a really good kind of partnership with Harry Kane last season, and is maybe slowly but surely coming back into the team. Obviously had a bit of injuries that kind of rolled him out towards the start of the season. He's obviously called up to the Germany team to replace Dennis Undav, so we might see him pick up some more game time for club and country. He might have a good start to the second half of the season as well. But there's no one in that team that can really do what Musiala does, and I don't think it's a coincidence that when he's not in that team, they just simply look like a club. They look like a team who are missing the playmaker. They actually remind me a bit of Arsenal with Martin Odegaard. That when you take him out of the team, they're just not the same club. The strikers don't know what they're doing. The central midfielders don't know who they're passing to. The opposing team just seem to know how to close them down so much better. And that's obviously a testament to Musiala and his remarkable talent. I was actually looking at some stats to compare him to last season. The one thing that really stood out to me is the actual amount of dribbles that he makes this season, and the carries, that, if you want to call them that, are right down. And that might sound like a bad thing, but I actually think it's a really good thing, because I think if there's one tendency that Musiala has, which maybe has held him back in the past, is that because he's obviously so good at dribbling and close control, he sometimes would take things too much into his own hands, and he would kind of run down in these kind of little cul-de-sacs in the box where you could kind of usher him out wide, and all of a sudden he's got 2 or 3 defenders around him. He's not doing anything with the ball, and the attack is kind of fizzled out. And I think that was more prevalent last season when he was kind of pushed out left, and Leroy Sané was allowed to play number 10 alongside, or not really number 10, but allowed to kind of play off Harry Kane as a kind of second striker. I think this season, Musiala is now undoubtedly that number 10,
Okay.
And yes, Bayern do have issues on the right wing and left wing, but they probably have to sign new players. But at least the Musiala thing's been fixed. At least he's in his position. He's playing his best style of football. He's not making these kind of little darting runs into cul-de-sacs and getting lost. His game seems to be so much more proactive, so much more streamlined. And he's basically just this incredible goal-scoring match winner for Bayern, and he seems to continue to be able to kind of pick the lock of these kind of stubborn defenses like St Pauli's, whether that's in the box or with incredible shots from like 30 or 40 yards out. And yeah, he's exactly where he has to be for Bayern. But my only issue is that I think the squad around him does need a huge amount of investment in it to fix things, because there's only so much that he can do when they come up against very good teams, I suppose.
Well, I mean, he has that ability right now that he's lacked for some time with both Bayern and Germany, and it's actually something that he himself has spoken about, right? The fact that he wanted to score not more goals, but more important goals. Be in those situations. In the one that forever haunted him was that in the 2018 World Cup, where he is in the box and against Japan, and he puts the ball over the crossbar, right? He scores that. Everything will be different. And so, that was sort of that one moment that he's come back to for many times, saying that he really wants to be more impactful when he's inside the box. He did score that very important goal for Germany, for Bayern to win the title. That year that Dortmund dropped it. He also did score a couple of really important goals for Germany at the Euros, right? So he's getting much more impactful. But like these two last ones, the header against Benfica, where I thought Bayern Munich were incredible by any measure except for scoring goals, and then of course he pops up and heads the goal across the line, right? Like this is not a typical Musiala situation either. And so that, I think, is something that he's really worked on. This goal against St Pauli, I mean, if you haven't seen it yet, that's an incredible goal. It's just one of those wonder strikes that you will probably see for years and years and years in the highlight reels. It's a beautiful goal. And so I think that is something that he's really stepped up. And I think that is what, I think he's been world class for a couple of years now. But this is just another level now. He's become a impactful player, right? And who is carrying this team. And he's also, it's really interesting, and this is maybe to bring it also back to the Dresden thing. Bayern Munich put him up for interviews during the NFL game in Munich on the main show there, right? During halftime. He was part of the halftime show. They had him with board director Diederich, answering some really, really important questions, so they're putting him up for these things, and that is a sign for me that, well, I know that the contract thing is going really well, but I think we have to wonder two things. I personally think Musiala is one of the best players in the world right now at this very moment, and he's increasingly becoming better. But I think he might be Bayern Munich's captain at some point.
Yeah, this all comes down to, I mean, again, I don't want to be too negative about this, but he does still have something to, maybe not to prove, but he does. He said himself, he has to score more important goals. And if you do look at the goals he's scored in the Bundesliga this season, they've been against Wolfsburg, Holstein Kiel, Werder Bremen, Bochum, and St Pauli. So that's like, that's more or less the bottom five.
The St Pauli was a winner.
Yeah, of course, yeah. The St Pauli one was a really important goal, don't get me wrong. And, as you said, and then he scores against, or before that, he scores against Benfica, which is also a very important goal. But I think it's quite telling that Vincent Kompany opted to not start him in that Aston Villa game. He obviously was not fit for the Barcelona game, so he can't really play in that. So, he only came on, obviously, in the second half, so can't really put that on him. But after the international break, they've got Augsburg in what will be a crucial Bavarian rivalry, Manu, as you know, the Bavarian derby, as we like to call it in this podcast. Against a very good Augsburg side. No, he'll probably score a hat-trick knowing his goal scored so far this season. But more importantly, they then play PSG in the Champions League. They then play Dortmund away in the Bundesliga, and then they play Leverkusen at home in the Pokal. So that's 3 games that you're looking at and thinking, right, that's where Musiala has to. He's in great form. He's scored important goals in games against St Pauli and Benfica. Now go do it against PSG, Dortmund, and Leverkusen. I'm not saying he has to prove himself. He certainly doesn't have to prove himself to me. But he himself has said he has to marry the goals he scores in these games against the quote unquote minnows with the goals he scores in these big one-off games. And Bayern are by no means out of the woods yet in the Champions League group stage yet after those 2 defeats. So they have to beat PSG. They have to beat Dortmund, who, let's be honest, obviously haven't been great. We don't even know if Nuri Sahin will still be in charge at that point. But they have had a tendency of showing up in big games. They've beaten Frankfurt and they've beaten RB Leipzig already this season. So you never know what could happen in that game. And of course, by that point, Leverkusen might be back on their feet and looking pretty strong. So he's got 3 big tests coming up. And I guess we'll see how he does.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I personally think he is in incredible form. And I think good news too for Bayern Munich. The other most important player for their future, Alexander Pavlovic, is back in training, right? Ahead of schedule, you might add. So that's bad news for the rest of the Bundesliga because I think Bayern Munich look incredibly strong. I don't know if they're going to have a wobble in them or not. We'll see. But it's incredible good news for Bayern Munich fans who I'm knowing there's many of them listening. So yeah, things are going really well for your club.